Eye view on.
"Bridge up," he commanded. The members of Bridge 4 cheered their agreement, grabbing their bridge and hoisting it high. Kaladin pulled on a shield, grabbing the straps in his hand. Then he turned, raising it high. With a shout, straps in his hand. Then he turned, raising it. He led his men in a charge back toward that abandoned blue banner. Dalinar's plate leaked stormlight from dozens of small breaks. No major piece had escaped. Light rose above him like steam from a cauldron, lingering as stormlight did, slowly diffusing. The sun beat down upon him, baking him as he fought. He was so tired. It hadn't been long since Sadeas's betrayal, not as time was counted in battles. But Dalinar had pushed himself hard, staying at the very front, fighting side by side with Adolin. His plate had lost much stormlight. It was growing heavier and lent him less power with each swing. Soon it would weigh him down, slowing him so the Parshendi could swarm over him. He'd killed many of them, so many, a frightening number. And he did it without the thrill. He was hollow inside. Better that than pleasure. He hadn't killed nearly enough of them. They focused on Dalinar and Adolin. With shard-bearers on the front line, any breach would soon be patched by a man in gleaming armor and a deadly blade. The Parshendi had to bring him and Adolin down first. They knew it, Dalinar knew it, Adolin knew it. Stories spoke of battlefields where the shard-bearers were the last ones standing, pulled down by their enemies after long heroic fights. Completely unrealistic. If you killed the shard-bearers first, you could take their blades and turn them against the enemy. He swung again, muscles lagging with fatigue. Dying first. It was a good place to be. Ask nothing of them you wouldn't do yourself. Dalinar stumbled on the rocks, his shard plate feeling as heavy as regular armor. He could be satisfied with the way he'd handled his own life, but his men. He had failed them. Thinking of the way he had stupidly led them into a trap, that sickened him. And then there was Navani. Of all the times to finally begin courting her, Dalinar thought. 6 years wasted. A lifetime wasted. And now she'll have to grieve again. That thought made him raise his arms and steady his feet on the stone. He fought off the Parshendi, struggling on. For her. He would not let himself fall while he still had strength. Nearby, Adolin's armor leaked as well. The youth was extending himself more and more to protect his father. There had been no discussion of trying, perhaps, to leap the chasms and flee. With chasms so wide, the chances were slim. But beyond that, they would not abandon their men to die. He and Adolin had lived by the codes. They would die by the codes. Dalinar swung again, staying at Adolin's side, fighting in that just-out-of-reach tandem way of two shard-bearers. Sweat streamed down his face inside his helm, and he shot a final glance toward the disappearing army. It was just barely visible on the horizon. Dalinar's current position gave him a good view down to the west. Let that man be cursed for blood of my fathers. What is that? A small force was moving across the western plateau, running toward the tower. A solitary bridge crew, carrying their bridge. "It can't be," Dalinar said, stepping back from the fighting, letting the Cobalt Guard, what was left of them, rush in to defend him. Distrusting his eyes, he pushed his visor up. The rest of Sarius's army was gone, but this single bridge crew remained. Why? "Adolin!" he bellowed, pointing with his sharp blade, a surge of hope flooding his limbs. The young man turned, tracing Dalinar's gesture. Adolin froze. "Impossible!" he yelled. "What kind of trap is that?" "A foolish one, if it is a trap. We are already dead." "But why would he send one back? What purpose?" "Does it matter?" They hesitated for a moment amid the battle. Both knew the answer. "Assault formations!" Dalinar screamed, turning back to his troops. Stormfather, there were so few of them left. Less than half of his original 8,000. "Form up!" Adolin called. "Get ready to move! We're going to punch through them, men! Gather everything you've got. We've got one chance." A slim one, Dalinar thought, pulling his visor down. "We'll have to cut through the rest of the Parshendi army." Even if they reached the bottom, they'd probably find the crew dead, their bridge cast into the chasm. The Parshendi archers were already forming up. There were hundreds of them. It would be a slaughter. But it was a hope. A tiny, precious hope. If his army was going to fall, it would do so while trying to seize that hope. Raising his shard blade high, feeling a surge of strength and determination, Dalinar charged forward at the head of his men. For the second time in one day, Kaladin ran toward an armed Parshendi position, shield before him, wearing armor cut from the corpse of a fallen enemy. Perhaps he should have felt revolted at what he'd done in creating his armor, but it was no worse than what the Parshendi had done in killing Dunny, Maps, and that nameless man who had shown Kaladin kindness on his first day as a bridgeman. Kaladin still wore that man's sandals. Us and them, he thought. That was the only way a soldier could think of it. For today, Dalinar Kholin and his men were part of the us. A group of Parshendi had seen the bridgeman approaching and was setting up with bows. Fortunately, it appeared that Dalinar had seen Kaladin's band as well, for the army in blue was beginning to cut its way toward rescue. It wasn't going to work. There were too many Parshendi, and Dalinar's men would be tired. It was another disaster. But for once, Kaladin charged into it with eyes wide open. "This is my choice," he thought, as the Parshendi archers formed up. "It's not some angry god watching me, not some spren playing tricks, not some twist of fate. It's me. I chose to follow Tien. I chose to charge the Shardbearer and save Amaran. I chose to escape the slave pits. And now I choose to try to rescue these men, though I know I will probably fail." The Parshendi loosed their arrows, and Kaladin felt an exultation. Tiredness evaporated. Fatigue fled. He wasn't fighting for Sarius. He wasn't working to line someone's pockets. He was fighting to protect. The arrows zipped at him, and he swung his shield in an arc, spraying them away. Others came, shooting this way and that, seeking his flesh. He stayed just ahead of them, leaping as they shot for his thighs, turning as they shot for his shoulders, raising his shield when they shot for his face. It wasn't easy, and more than a few arrows got close to him, scoring his breastplate or shin guards. But none hit. He was doing it. Something was wrong. He spun between two arrows, confused. "Kaladin," Syl said, hovering nearby, back to her smaller form. "There!" She pointed toward the other staging plateau, the one nearby that Dalinar had used for his assault. A large contingent of Parshendi had jumped across to that plateau, and were kneeling down, raising bows. Pointed not at him, but right at Bridge 4's unshielded flank. "No!" Kaladin screamed, stormlight escaping from his mouth in a cloud. He turned and ran back across the rocky plateau toward the bridge crew. Arrows launched at him from behind. One took his backplate square on, but skidded aside. Another hit his helm. He leaped over a rocky rift, dashing with all the speed his stormlight could lend him. The Parshendi at the side were drawing. There were at least 50 of them. He was going to be too late. He was going to... "Bridge 4, he bellowed. "Side carry right." They hadn't practiced that maneuver in months, but their training was manifest as they obeyed without question, dropping the bridge to their sides just as the archers released. The flight of arrows hit the bridge's deck, bristling across the wood. Kaladin let out a relieved breath, reaching the bridge team who had slowed to carry the bridge on the side. "Kaladin," Rock said, pointing. Kaladin spun. The archers behind, on the tower, were drawing for a large volley. The bridge crew was exposed. The archers loosed. He yelled again, screaming out, stormlight infusing the air around him as he threw every bit of it he had into his shield. The scream echoed in his ears. The stormlight burst from him, his clothing freezing and cracking. Arrows darkened the sky. Something hit him. An extended impact that tossed him backward into the bridgeman. He hit hard, grunting as the force continued to push upon him. The bridge ground to a halt, the men stopping. All fell still. Kaladin blinked, feeling completely drained. His body hurt, his arms tingled, his back ached. There was a sharp pain in his wrist. He groaned, opening his eyes, stumbling as Rock's hands caught him from behind. A muted thump, the bridge being set down. "Idiots," Kaladin thought. "Don't set it down. Retreat." The bridgemen crowded around him as he slipped to the ground, overwhelmed by having expended too much stormlight. He blinked at what he held before him, attached to his bleeding arm. His shield was covered in arrows. Dozens of them, some splitting the others. The bones crossing the shield's front had shattered. The wood was in splinters. Some of the arrows had gone through and hit his forearm. That was the pain. Over 100 arrows, an entire volley, pulled into a single shield. "By the bright color's rays," Drehy said softly. What was... "It was like a fountain of light," Moash said, kneeling beside Kaladin. "Like the sun itself burst from you, Kaladin." "The Parshendi," Kaladin croaked and let go of the shield. The straps were broken, and as he struggled to stand, the shield all but disintegrated, falling to pieces, scattering dozens of broken arrows at his feet. A few remained stuck in his arm, but he ignored the pain, looking across at the Parshendi. The groups of archers on both plateaus froze in stunned postures. The ones in front began to call to one another in a language Kaladin didn't understand. "Neshua Kadal." They stood up. And then they fled. "What?" Kaladin said. "I don't know," Teft said, cradling his own wounded arm. "But we're getting you to safety. Blast this arm. Open." The shorter man brought David, and they ushered Kaladin away to a more secure location at the center of the platform. He held his arm, numb, his exhaustion so deep that he could barely think. "Bridge up," Moash called. "We've still got a job to do." The rest of the bridgemen grimly ran back to their bridge, hoisting it up. On the tower, Dalinar's force was fighting its way through the Parshendi toward the possible safety of the bridge crew. They must be taking such heavy losses, Kaladin thought numbly.